Daniel lived on the edge of the town, where the gravel roads met dust and silence. His farmhouse was a simple one, chipped white paint, creaking floorboards, and a field that stretched like a worn blanket across the earth. It had been nearly 6 years since his wife, Margaret, had passed. Since then, Daniel had kept to himself, speaking only when necessary, his voice as soft and weathered as his hands. The town remembered him as the man who once smiled icily at the farmer's market, always by Margaret's side. But now, the warmth in his eyes had dimmed, buried under long days and quiet nights. People would nod at him in passing, and he'd nod back, always polite, always distant. His neighbors had stopped expecting him at gatherings or church. He didn't mind. He thought he had nothing left to offer. Each morning, he walked his fields, the soil rough under his boots. He grew potatoes, corn, tomatoes, nothing fancy, just what he could manage alone. The work kept his hands busy and his mind from drifting too far. But even as he worked, he couldn't stop hearing her voice in the quiet. The way she used to laugh when the tomatoes grew crooked or hum old songs while baking bread. Margaret had been the heart of everything. She loved people the way sunflowers chased the sun, always open, always bright. Daniel was never the social one, but with her, he felt complete. After she died, everything seemed dimmer, like the world had pulled the curtains closed. On her birthday every year, he took out the old journal she used to keep, her battered, leather-bound notebook filled with her thoughts, recipes, little quotes she liked. He never read more than a page or two at a time. It was still too much. This year, he hadn't touched it. He thought maybe he wouldn't again, but something about that summer felt different. The skies were dry. People talked about shortages, rising prices, rumors of trucks not making it through. Still, Daniel kept his head down, planting, watering, waiting. That was his world, small, simple, and just enough for one man. Or so he thought. It started quietly, like most disasters do. A few missed deliveries at the local store. Then the shelves began to look emptier with each passing week. The town's only supermarket shortened its hours, and the farmer's co-op stopped accepting new orders. People whispered about broken supply lines, droughts out west, gas prices that made trucking impossible. No one said the word crisis, but it hung in the air like heat on pavement. Daniel noticed the change when he went to town for nails and feed. A mother stood near the last bag of rice, 2 children behind her, eyes wide. A man ahead of him at the counter argued about the price of a loaf of bread. That night, Daniel sat on his porch, watching the moon rise over his fields. The wind felt dry against his skin, yet his crops somehow kept growing. The corn stood tall, the tomatoes plump. A late spring rain had blessed his soil just enough. It wasn't a miracle, but it was close. He looked at the rows and rows of green and gold, and for the first time in years, felt the pull of something bigger than his routine. He could have ignored it, kept his harvest for himself, maybe sold a little quietly like before. But the next day he passed the bakery and saw a closed sign taped crookedly to the glass. A few people gathered on the corner, murmuring. A child cried when her mother told her there'd be no more cereal until next week, or maybe longer. Daniel didn't speak, but something inside him shifted. That evening, he went to the barn and opened the old chest where Margaret's journal rested. Dust clouded the air as he turned the pages, yellowed and soft. Near the middle, a sentence caught his eye. She had written, "If you have more than you need, plant it in someone else's hands." He closed the journal slowly. His hands trembled. The next morning, he hitched his old trailer and filled it with baskets of fresh produce. Potatoes, corn, tomatoes, cucumbers. He drove into town, parked near the church steps, and left the baskets there with a small sign that simply said, "Take what you need." No name, no speech, just food. That night, he couldn't sleep. By the end of that week, Daniel's trailer had become a fixture. He brought it every other day, loaded with whatever he'd picked that morning. Word spread quietly at first. A few families began waiting by the steps before he arrived. They never asked questions. They just smiled, nodded, and left with enough to make it through the day. Some townsfolk were skeptical. Whispers fluttered through the diner and barber shop. Why is he doing it? No one just gives away food. Must be up to something. But Daniel didn't offer answers. He just kept driving in, unloading his trailer, and returning home. The fields needed more from him now. He worked longer hours under the sun, planting in spaces he hadn't touched in years. The aches in his back were sharper. His fingers grew raw from the soil, and some mornings he could barely lift the baskets. Still, he worked. The silence of grief was being replaced by something else. Not noise, not joy, but purpose, a quiet rhythm of giving. One evening, after a long day in the field, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with Margaret's journal open again. The pages seemed to breathe with her voice. He read about the soup kitchens she used to volunteer at, the letters she wrote to families during holidays, her belief that kindness didn't need recognition, just action. He closed the book and looked around the empty kitchen. The air still held her memory, but it no longer suffocated him. It filled him gently, like the smell of fresh bread or warm rain. Then came the hardest moment. One night, he returned from town to find the fence to his southern field broken. Deer had trampled rows of new sprouts, likely looking for food. Daniel stood there for a long time, the moonlight casting shadows over the damage. The loss stung, not just the ruined crops, but the effort behind them. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. Was he enough? Was this even helping? He wanted to stop. He was tired, alone. But as he turned to go inside, he spotted something near the porch. A hand-drawn card taped to the railing. A child's scrawl in purple marker read, "Thank you, Mr. Farmer. You made my mom smile." Daniel wiped his eyes and went inside without a word. He'd be back in the field before sunrise. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness carry the deepest weight. Daniel didn't set out to change anyone. He simply listened to the quiet voice of love that remained and let it guide his hands. In doing so, he reminded an entire town what it means to be seen, to be cared for, and to carry one another through the storm. Maybe we all have a little seed of that in us, waiting to be planted. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Like, comment, and subscribe to hear more tales from the heart.